Hey out there survivors, and welcome back for another episode of Let's Survive News. This week we've got some pretty cool news incoming about things like Control, The Medium, Resident Evil, and a whole bunch of stuff. And then as per last week, we've got our community spotlight at the back end where we're going to tell you about some really cool channels and show you some cool art and all that kind of stuff. If you're a horror fan, you will probably know the name Dread Central. Dread Central is one of the premier horror websites out there. Dread has brought horror news to everybody for a hell of a long time and developed quite a fan base and following. Over the last couple of years, Dread moved into film production and has made a bunch of awesome self-released Dread titles. Now, the amazing folks at Dread have taken a step further and created Dread XP, which is a gaming website. But even more than that, and this is where this news gets good, guys, they've also created the Dread X Collection. So this is 10 horror games made by 10 developers in a week. Pretty freaking crazy, right? And the idea behind this was to make 10 PT style games, which is not to say that they're demos. They are self-contained experiences, but about the same size and scale as PT. So 10 of those in this collection. The games within the Dread X collection are actually all tied together in some way via themes or story, and so that's pretty cool. Even cooler than that, $2 of each purchase goes to Doctors Without Borders, so you are helping people out who are doing amazing work right now in the middle of this crazy pandemic that's affecting the world. There's a trailer available and I'll drop it in the description below, and as I say, it launches on the 26th of May, and I would recommend adding this to your Steam wish list right now. It looks really cool, really interesting, some great people involved. The guy who developed Dusk is on there, Secret Cow Level are in there. And yeah, there's just some great developers attached. So 10 cool little horror games in one snazzy little collection. So massive congrats to Dread for expanding beyond, you know, horror news, horror movies, and now horror gaming. That's incredible. Launching today on a multitude of platforms is a game called Maneater. Now, this looks great. There's actually a trailer reaction here on the channel that just got released. And yeah, you can watch as my mind is exploding at this game where you're a giant shark killing everybody. Yeah, I love these type of games. I used to love the Jaws game on the PS2 and stuff, so I am a big fan of games. Hungry Shark World, I actually had a lot of fun playing on mobile. The game is being published by Deep Silver, who are the amazing people behind games like Saints Row. So yeah, this is another one to keep your eye on. I am hoping to get it and play it here on the channel and maybe do a review or a let's play, because as I say, Killer Shark games, take my friggin' money. The acclaimed director of 2018's God of War, Cory Barlog, a name that I always mess up because I usually say Balrog, but I didn't this time, so yay, tweeted this week that he would love a crack at a Silent Hill game. There was a tweet that went up that was kind of like a picture of 4 PS1 games, and it was like, which one would you like to see get remade? You know, it included Metal Gear Solid and a few others. And Cory Barlog, there we go. I almost messed it up that time. He saw this tweet and he responded with Silent Hill and let me make it. Now, obviously, this is not a reveal or anything, but it's just, for me, it's imagining somebody of Cory Barlog's talent tackling that franchise. I mean, we almost got it with Hideo Kojima, so I would love to see someone like Cory Barlog take a stab at it, especially with some of his other credits. He was the cinematic director on the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot as well, so yeah, he is a dude with some awesome credibility behind him. But, you know, unless Konami and Sony come together and make it a PS5 exclusive, this ain't something that's going to happen. It's just a bit of cool news that such a cool dude would like to make Silent Hill. I think all of us would kind of like to make Silent Hill, but at least he'd probably make it really good. Capcom revealed some information about the Resident Evil 3 remake this week that has kind of split the fan base again into factions that think A, it's really cool, or B, that it destroys the whole franchise, which it always seems to be those kind of extreme opinions on this stuff. But no, in an interview, Capcom explained that the nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake, the parasites that are used to control him, are the same as Las Plagas in Resident Evil 4. And if you played the game, you do come across files and stuff that say Umbrella Europe is where this parasite was developed. Now, previously, Capcom had kind of moved Resident Evil 4 as far away from Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3 as possible. Like, they had very little connections to any of those previous titles. So yeah, it's a bit weird that Capcom are now retconning and trying to go backwards and trying to reconnect 3 and 4. But it's also not that weird when you think that Capcom have, I mean, it's not 100% confirmed, but it's heavily rumored, and we all know it's more than likely happening, a Resident Evil 4 remake in the works. That if they do, they're going to obviously try and link these new remake titles together a lot more efficiently, considering how cumbersome Resident Evil lore gets when you start getting into it. But yeah, I fall a bit on the I think this is really cool side. I love the idea that Nemesis is kind of like one of the early Plagas monsters, because Resident Evil 4 I believe takes place a couple of years after 3, so like he would have been like a test subject, you know, a very early Plagas project, I'd imagine. But yeah, I'm down for all this stuff. Like, look, if you don't like it, the original games still exist and you can just go play them. You don't have to take this new canon into, you know, as canon. Well, you kind of do. No, you don't have to take it as canon. I've gone way off track. This is what Resident Evil timelines and canon and shit does to me. Yeah, just as always, Resident Evil's timeline being as convoluted as possible, and Capcom not giving a damn and changing their minds whenever they damn well feel like it. But, you know, that's Resident Evil and we wouldn't have it any other way. This year is the 10-year anniversary of one of the best psychological horror games to come out, potentially ever, but definitely in the last decade, which is Alan Wake from Remedy. The game came out to lukewarm kind of commercial success when it came out, when it debuted. It actually found a much bigger audience when it moved to PC, and it's become very much a big cult status game. Something that Remedy traditionally do is that they do feature little crossover tie-in content between games. So like you will see stuff in Quantum Break that, you know, ties back to Alan Wake, and vice versa. You'll see stuff in Alan Wake that ties back to Max Payne. And we noticed this in Control, Remedy's newest release, that there was a lot of information about Alan Wake that could be found if the players went investigating. You could discern a little bit about what happened to Alan Wake after the events of the first game and DLC. Eagle-eyed players who played Control will have spotted that there was several nods to Alan Wake within the game, and even little bits of information that maybe give you some inclination as to the fact that the Bureau knows more about what happened to Alan Wake than we do after the events of the original game 10 years ago. Sam Lake, who created Alan Wake, had some stuff to say about the inclusion of Alan Wake content into Control. He said, "Now that Control is out, we didn't want to make big noise about this before its release, but I wanted to build the idea of a connected universe for Remedy in the background. If you play Control and explore, you'll find things that show Alan Wake and Control exist in the same world. What's more, it becomes clear that the Federal Bureau of Control that deals with these unexplainable things has been looking into what happened with Alan Wake. They have actual research and documentation around it. For fans from back in the day who didn't quite understand what was going on in Alan Wake, like Max Payne, the story was very much one man's experience of his journey. Some things are not explained further than he sees them. Now we have this bureau that deals with these things and applies science and research to them. We have this opportunity of looking back at what happened in Alan Wake and how does the bureau see it. Well, there was this otherworldly event that took place in Bright Falls and they suddenly have this terminology. We have people that say, I loved Alan Wake but I didn't quite understand what happened, and now that I've played Control I understand what happened in Alan Wake, and that's been really fun and a nice opportunity." It's cool to see that like this was an intentional thing on their part. They are trying to connect the worlds in some way, which gives a lot of us hope, maybe false hope, that there may be an Alan Wake 2 down the line, especially as Remedy regained control of the license from Microsoft just before the 10-year anniversary. I mean, it's the type of series that could really benefit from a remaster, and a sequel would be a no-brainer, I reckon. But Sam Lake also went on to talk about the upcoming AWE DLC, AWE, which if you take those first two letters, that's AW, Alan Wake. But anyway, yeah, he went down to talk about AWE and say, you know, a little bit more about how that connects to the whole Alan Wake thing. He says, "We have that coming later this year. And yes, we've been hinting at it, but not spelling it out. I can say that you will find out more about the Bureau's research on what happened with Alan Wake and where they are with it today. It's kind of nice with this being Alan Wake's 10-year anniversary that we have an opportunity to have more Alan Wake related content for the fans." So, it's pretty cool. It definitely seems like Remedy are not giving up on Alan Wake, which a lot of us feared, you know, when they kind of moved on to Quantum Break, then they moved on to Control. There was a lot of fears on people's minds that, okay, maybe that's it. Maybe they're not coming back to Alan Wake, which has so many unanswered questions at its ending. But luckily, it seems like Remedy are supporting the game, and they are continuing that story. So I, for one, am very excited. Alan Wake is one of my favourite psychological horror games ever made, so I will be there for this. Speaking of awesome psychological horror games, Bloober Team, who made Layers of Fear and The Blair Witch and Observer, not The Blair Witch, just Blair Witch, they recently spoke about their game The Medium, which we did a trailer reaction for here on the channel, and it was so friggin' good because they have Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill fame as the composer. But Bloober Team talked about The Medium, and they kind of explained a little bit about their plans for it, which was really cool because this is a game that I'm keen to play because it sounds like it fits with my own personal ethos, even as a filmmaker myself. So, Bloober Team have said, "We at Bloober are specialising in creating psychological horror games, but we're not doing it only to scare the shit out of people, but also tackle a specific subject. Layers of Fear was about work versus family. Of course, it's still a horror game, but at its heart, it's telling you about more mature and more important topics. Then we created Observer with Rutger Hauer, and this was about what makes us human. And then we developed the Blair Witch game, which tells a story about the inner guilt that burns you from the inside. That's our philosophy in making games." This is where things get interesting. So he's talking a lot about Bloober Team's past there, but now he talks a little bit about The Medium and Bloober Team's future. The Medium is a game about points of view, so nothing is simple, nothing is black and white, and everything depends on the perspective and the information we have. Playing as a medium will give us a very unique vantage point that's beyond the reach for ordinary people. So, I mean, I am a huge fan of media that does not kind of portray black and white imagery, as in, this is good, this is bad. I like having that grey area to feel around and try the sympathetic monster, try to understand what's happening, and yeah, so I'm so down for this game. We also learned a little bit about The Medium, and in The Medium, the protagonist, Marianne, is haunted by the visions of a dead child and is summoned to an abandoned hotel. So that's kind of where things take off. Bloober Team were also asked about the perspective of the game because their previous horror titles have all been first person. So some people were very curious as to why they made the decision to move to third person. They said it was for an emotional response because they said if you see Marianne holding somebody and they're dying, then you want to be able to see her, the character, and not just like be looking through her eyes at the moment. So that is very interesting. But I definitely feel like the third person perspective in this game from the trailer and everything definitely gives it that Silent Hill vibe, and I am all in for that. Like, yeah, just try and stop me. So that's basically it, guys, for this week's news. Some really cool tidbits in there, some good horror news, good news if you're a fan of Alan Wake, also good news in some respects if you're a fan of Resident Evil, but as I say, that whole bridging of 3 and 4, 3 Remake and 4 has become very much a hot button issue. A hot button issue? Well, no, it's become definitely a divisive, contested point between Resident Evil fans. But yeah, it's time for Community Spotlight, which is one of my favourite segments of the show now because I love highlighting the work of passionate people. So, first of all, one sec, I just got a little itch here. I just got to get that itch out. Oh, yeah. So, this week's Community Spotlight, I want to highlight a few different things. First of all, I want to talk about the Save Room podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Save Room podcast. I am your host, Jason.
So the Save Room podcast is a new podcast. It's literally just started. Its episodes release on a Wednesday. The reason I want to highlight it is it's from a guy who I've known for a couple of years now named Jason O'Donnell. Jason is a writer, he's a poet, he's a musician, a songwriter, everything. Filmmaker, actor. He's done a bit of everything. He's just a very creative dude. And Jason, like myself, loves survival horror. So he has decided during everything that's happening right now in the world to take this time to create a podcast, and not explicitly again about horror. He also is going to talk to people about music because he's a big music fan and things like that, but definitely with some discussion on survival horror there as well. So I am... Like, there's only been one episode so far, but it's a nice little intro and explains a little bit about Jason and why he's decided to do this. But yeah, I would love if people are watching this and want to check that out. I'll drop a link in the description to Podbean where the save room is being hosted, and I would love if you could check it out and give Jason some love, because he's a good dude and he supports others. And speaking of podcasts, I want to give a shout out to one of my favorite podcasts for the last probably 2 years. It's run by two very close friends of mine, Mitch Bain and Andy Stewart, and it is called Strong Language and Violent Scenes Podcast.
Just a quick word of warning before we get going that the following podcast will almost certainly contain spoilers and may also contain strong language and conversations of an adult nature.
If you are a horror fan, this is such an amazing friggin' podcast, you don't even understand. The basic premise is so simple and genius. It's basically Andy and Mitch will bring a guest on, generally, or they'll compete against each other, and the guest will bring on a film that they love, that is critically and commercially derided. To give you an example, I was on the show about half a year ago, and I picked Jason Goes to Hell, Friday the 13th, Part 9. And I went on to defend how much I love that movie, and Andy and Mitch have to kind of explain, well, I have to try and change their minds. And it's such a fun, simple idea, but like executed perfectly. They've had amazing guests, like they've had horror royalty on the show, so it's definitely worth checking out Strong Languages and Violence. Strong Languages? So it's definitely worth checking out Strong Language of Violent Scenes. I will once again drop a link below to the podcast on Podbean, and I honestly, this is the most glowing endorsement. Like, when this pandemic has passed, I'll be back in my car all the time like I was beforehand, and all I did when I drove around before I've been stuck at home is listen to podcasts, and one of those was always Strong Language Violent Scenes. So huge shout out to Andy and Mitch, who are incredible dudes, still doing it through this whole crazy situation we're all in right now. So new episodes going up every week, every Friday, and then a mini-sode, I believe, on a Monday. So yeah, check out Strong Language Violent Scenes. It's friggin' amazing. Quick little plug now for a musician that I've checked out on YouTube, a musician called Dante, doing very cool electronic, strange music. It might not be your cup of tea. I really think it's quite cool. So please check out Dante. I'll drop a link in the description for some cool kind of, I guess you'd say, video game inspired music maybe, because it definitely has that feel, although it's definitely not just video gamey music, like it's not chiptune. But yeah, definitely check out Dante. And finally, we've no cosplay this week, unfortunately, but what we do have, and there's a story behind this that I love. So I showed you a piece of art last week, which was a Hunter Gamma painting that was done by a guy named Jack, Petrichor Crown, on Twitter. In my search for content this week, I was on a Facebook group, right? And I saw these images, which I will show you soon, I won't spoil it. And I saw them and I thought, oh my god, those are amazing, I need them for the channel, I absolutely need them. So I contacted the guy and said, hey man, like this art is incredible, I would love to feature it on my channel. And he came back and said, oh, what a strange small little world this is. It's Jack from Twitter. Guys, I'm not even joking. I had no idea. Like, I had no clue. But anyhow, this is our second week in a row featuring Jack, who is incredible, has a Patreon. Please support him. He's an amazing artist doing such cool stuff. So good that I randomly came across his art twice and just fell in love with it. So, what he did that I fell in love with this week, he did the cast of Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica as dogs. Here is the cast of Resident Evil 1 as doggos. Look at how amazing they are. Here we go. Here we have the cast of Resident Evil 2 as doggos. Some of my personal favorites here include the Mr. X in the back. It's so good. Here we have the cast of Resident Evil 3 as doggos. And they're such good boys and girls. Look at them. Nemesis is quite epic, actually. And here we have the cast of Resident Evil Code Veronica as puppers. And yeah, again, I love not just puppers in this one, actually, because we've got Siamese cats for the Ashfords. But yeah, I just think Jack's art is so phenomenal. He said he bashed that out in like a few, you know, in not that long and stuff. Like, that blows my mind. That level of awesomeness and creativity. Like, to have to think about, you know, which dogs would represent which characters and stuff. I'm just such a huge fan of Jack's. And if you've liked the Hunter Gamma piece you saw on here and those awesome Resident Evil Doggo pieces, please head over to Jack's Patreon. Well, he's also on Twitter. Head over to Twitter and follow him. It's in the description below. And please head to his Patreon and throw him a buck, you know, $3, whatever you can afford a month, because whenever you can, because like he's the real deal, y'all. He's the real deal. That is it for this week's news episode. It's a good bit longer than last week's one because there's a lot more news. But yeah, I'm happy to sit here and talk about horror news as long as I can, as long as there is news. So yeah, thank you so much for checking out this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the community spotlight, and I hope you check out those artists and support them, because that would be really cool of you. And I would give you a virtual hug like this, a little tiny virtual hug. Oh, virtual hugs. Yay. This lockdown madness is real. It's getting to me. Coming up next week, we have some very cool new stuff as well, like interviews. Let's Survive interviews is starting next week with some very cool guests that I'm not going to reveal right now, but I think you're going to be impressed. These are really cool folks from the industry that I'm going to be talking to on the show here. So I am looking forward to sharing those with you all. Guys, if you like the stuff you're seeing here, I really, really mean it. It would be amazing if you could hit the subscribe button and stick around for all we got coming. If you already have, you know I loves you. No, I really do appreciate it. And if you don't feel like it, if you're like, oh, I don't really use YouTube that much for that or whatever, that's totally fine too. Just being here and checking this out, I appreciate massively. But if you do like what we're doing, it would be awesome if you could subscribe. It really would. Follow us on the socials, links below to our Facebook, our Twitter, where we're active. We're posting pretty much every day. A lot of fun interactions on those channels, so get involved with us. Thank you so much, and as always, you guys, let's survive together, and peace out.